Here's some hints for using word problems to represent adding and subtracting with negative integers. So I'm going to use the soup example, in which I can add a hot cube to increase the temperature of the soup by 1 degree, or I can add a cold cube to reduce the temperature of the soup by 1 degree. I can also remove a hot cube, which will lower the temperature of the soup, or I could remove a cold cube, which would raise the temperature of the soup. So I'm going to start by illustrating soup in which I've got 2 hot cubes and 2 cold cubes, and the 2 hot cubes balance out the 2 cold cubes, and so my temperature will be 0 degrees for this soup. What happens now if I add 3 hot cubes and I add 2 cold cubes? So I add 3 hot cubes and I add 2 cold cubes. What is the temperature of the soup now? So if I look at the soup, I've got 4 hot cubes here that will balance out these 4 cold cubes, and I've got 1 hot cube left over that will raise the temperature of the soup by 1 degree. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting with +3, representing the hot cubes, and I'm adding 2 cold cubes, and cold cubes represent negative integers. I'm adding -2, and I'm ending with +1. So on a number line, what I'm doing, I'm starting at 3, and I'm adding 2 cold cubes. I'm adding -2. If I add a negative number on a number line, I move to the left. So I end up at +1. Let's do another example. Let's add 3 hot cubes and take away 2 cold cubes. So here's my 3 hot cubes, and to represent taking away 2 cold cubes, I'll put an X through these 2 cold cubes here, and now I don't have any cold cubes to balance my 5 hot cubes. My soup must increase in temperature by 5 degrees. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with +3, and I'm taking away 2 cold cubes. I'm taking away -2, and I'm ending at +5. So on a number line, what I'm doing is, again, I'm starting at 3, and then this time when I take away -2, I move to the right on my number line and end at +5. Let's do another example. Let's add 3 cold cubes and take away 2 hot cubes. So here's my 3 cold cubes, and let's take away the 2 hot cubes, put an X through them. Now I don't have any hot cubes to balance my 5 cold cubes, so I must be at -5. So what I'm doing here is starting at -3, and then I'm taking away +2, and I'm ending at -5. On my number line, I'm going to be on the left side of 0 now, and I'm starting at -3, and I'm taking away a positive number, so I must move to the left, so I end at -5. Let's do one last example. What if I add 3 cold cubes and add 2 hot cubes? Here's the 3 cold cubes, here's the 2 hot cubes. I can see that I've got 4 hot cubes here balanced by 4 cold cubes here, and I've got 1 cold cube left over. I must be at -1. So what I'm doing is I'm starting at -3, and I'm adding 2 hot cubes. I'm adding 2, and I'm ending at -1. So on a number line, I'm starting at -3, I'm adding a positive number, and I'm ending at -1. So that's the soup example for illustrating adding and subtracting positive and negative integers. there's another way of thinking about subtracting negative integers, and for that we're going to use a temperature example. So let's suppose it's 3 degrees Celsius in Vancouver and it's minus 2 degrees Celsius in Whistler. How much warmer is it in Vancouver than it is in Whistler? So I've got my thermometer here, and let's mark off the temperature in Vancouver. It's at +3 up here on the thermometer, and Whistler is at -2. And so what we're asking here is essentially, what is the difference between the Vancouver temperature at +3 and the Whistler temperature at -2? In other words, if we're in Whistler and then we go to Vancouver, how much does the temperature increase? So what we're doing is we're doing 3 minus -2. We're looking at the difference between 3 and -2. And we can see from our thermometer that we would increase 5 degrees. So this is equal to 5 degrees. Let's do another example. Let's suppose it's -4 in Nelson and +2 in Kelowna. How much colder is it in Nelson than it is in Kelowna? So again, here's my thermometer. Let's mark off where Nelson is down here at -4 and Kelowna is at +2. And what I'm saying is, if I'm in Kelowna and then I go to Nelson, how much does the temperature drop? So we can see on the thermometer that it's dropping 6 degrees. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting with a -4 and I'm wondering what is the difference between -4 and +2. So it's -6. So that's another way of illustrating subtraction with positive and negative integers, looking at a comparison between one number and another number.